I'm absolutely certain, based on the questions I get, that most people don't actually understand how the tech of a phone works. Why are certain models not supported anymore? Why do some models not work with Verizon? What's this thing called VoLTE or Wi Fi calling? Why can't Linux people build a phone so easily? How can phones get hacked? Why are phones more dangerous than computers? I thought of these as really basic questions, but as it turns out, they're not that basic. Even for those with a tech background, it may be that you don't know how your phone works either. So stay put, and I'll teach you your phone tech secrets. This will be a fun learning video. When you need better search results like those from Google but don't want the Google tracking, check out privacy search engine Startpage.com. It does not collect or share any of your personal data, so you can search anonymously. My company offers a VPN service, Bytes VPN, the Google phones, VPN routers, and now we offer a Brax Mail email service. These products are made to protect you from big tech and their tricks to profile us. If you're interested in them, they are on my app, BraxMe. The link is in the description. If you really think about it, it should seem obvious what a smartphone should be. You'll definitely figure out that there's some sort of phone hardware like the old flip phones, and maybe there's a computer to handle all the smarts of apps and such. But this is an oversimplification. Modern mobile phones are pretty complex computing machines, and they are miniaturized, and there are actually multiple CPUs in there, and yet there's only a single motherboard. Really confusing. I'm going to get into all that, plus you will learn about the parts of the phone that can be spied on and how they do that. First, let's start with the basic design of a smart mobile phone. Part of the problem with mobile phones is actually due to patent issues. Two companies bought most of the hardware patents related to the cell radio. What this means is that of the 2 billion cell phones sold each year, imagine the sales impact to the two companies that make the cell chips. These two companies are Qualcomm and MediaTek. Now look at the stock price of Qualcomm to see how it connects to when cell phones became popular. And here's MediaTek. Qualcomm is a USA company and MediaTek is based in Taiwan. So these companies pretty much make all the cell phone chips in the world. Now, the interesting fact is that these chips are not interchangeable. The most popular cell phone standard in the world is called GSM, and it is pretty much the standard internationally. A phone that works in India will work in the UK and Norway and Japan. Interestingly enough, a phone intended for the USA will work fine in the USA and even internationally. However, a phone not made for the USA will not work with Verizon. It also wouldn't work with Sprint before, though there's no longer any Sprint. The Verizon and Sprint carriers were known as CDMA carriers, and they used a completely different phone technology in the past. In order to work with this different CDMA cell technology, the cell phones for these carriers were built by Qualcomm, so only Qualcomm worked with CDMA carriers. Today, CDMA technology is gone. All carriers, including Verizon, use LTE. So basically, the differences between the technology disappeared. However, the CDMA carriers use CDMA reserved frequencies, so they're still different. They were using frequencies not commonly used elsewhere in the world. In the USA, AT&T and T-Mobile used the old GSM standard and were known as GSM carriers. Again, today there is also no GSM anymore outside of 3G. Everything is now LTE, even 5G. Just a brief history here. Most of us are familiar with the old 2G cell network, then it went to 3G, followed by 4G or LTE. Now they supposedly all use 5G, which is just LTE for now. So, forgetting about the terms here, there are just levels of performance of the cell network. Each new version has faster performance. During 2G days, we only used the phone for limited web browsing, and mostly we use texting and phone calls. Nowadays, phones are used to even watch movies. And of course, YouTube. And let's put this into perspective to understand what phones work for each carrier. In general, phones with Qualcomm cell chips work with all carriers worldwide on LTE. But MediaTek chips, often associated with Chinese phone models, only work with AT&T and T-Mobile. They do not work with Verizon. All I have to do is look at the cell chip and I know where the phone will work. The chip, by the way, is the part of the cell baseband modem. That's the actual module we are talking about. Isn't that simple? Just look at MediaTek versus Qualcomm and you'll know if Verizon is supported or not. That's pretty much the most common exception. There are other exceptions though they're more rare. Some older phones supported only a limited number of frequencies. This likely was to reduce cost. For example, a phone specifically made for India may exclude frequencies not used in India. It could still work elsewhere, but some rural areas in the US may need some longer range, lower frequencies that may not be supported. I don't see this as an issue anymore in phones made since 2019. As many of you in the USA have found, 3G phones have very limited support now. Mostly it's grandfathered in T-Mobile service, for example, but AT&T has eliminated 3G this year and Verizon eliminated it before. The real reason these carriers have eliminated 3G so fast is because they have to pay the government for the limited frequencies they have. So they want to free up 3G frequencies so they can utilize them for the so-called 5G. 5G as used today is actually just multiple LTE connections at once. That's how they achieve the higher bandwidths. And they need to do this by using up whatever frequencies they already have as well as add frequencies that have been opened up in near the 1 gigahertz range. When a phone today is said to be 5G, it just means it has multiple antennas and multiple radios to handle transmissions in the new frequencies. Your LTE phone will work just fine without 5G. That's because the same frequencies are still supported. You just don't have access to the additional frequencies. Makes sense? So likely your LTE phone currently will work for a long time. I don't expect LTE support to drop before 2030. This means you don't have to be forced to get a new phone, as we have just been forced to do with the elimination of 3G. Next question. Some LTE phone models, like 2017 to 2018 models, are no longer supported in the USA as well. Again, really putting the consumer in a bad spot. These particular models were not supported anymore, even though these were LTE phones, because these phones did not support VoLTE, Voice over LTE. To explain this more clearly, voice apparently was being transmitted over 3G on these phone models, and then data was transmitted over LTE. So basically they were hybrid models. Because they are dropping 3G completely, these phones could then not run voice over LTE. However, in theory, they can still use something called Wi-Fi calling. When Wi-Fi is available, the call is sent over the internet instead. Wi-Fi calling is helpful in rural areas with a bad voice signal, but it is not really connected to the cell network itself. Just to make this clear as well, not all phones support Wi-Fi calling. It is something the carrier has to allow. So there seems to have been a transition stage around 2016 to 2018 where phones of that period seem to have the shortest shelf life. An example is the Pixel 1, the original Pixel, and the phones below iPhone 6. But 2019 models and beyond seem to be forwardly compatible with everything. This included the Pixel 3 and the iPhone 6. When purchasing new phones, pay attention to when it was manufactured. And maybe my use of the model year is wrong too. In reality, a Pixel 3 was introduced in December 2018. So here I'm talking about when these phones were mostly sold, which is after December. I get this question all the time. Does it work with Mint, US Cellular, Cricket, Republic Wireless, Google Fi, and on and on? There are lots of these carriers. But these are not lots of carriers. Fact, there are only 3 carriers in the USA. T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon. The rest are just resellers. So find out what actual carrier is involved. The reseller is called an MVNO, Mobile Virtual Network Operator. For example, Google Fi is an MVNO for T-Mobile. The only question really is if your MVNO works with Verizon, in which case you could have compatibility issues with non-Qualcomm chips. Otherwise, all MVNOs that work with AT&T and T-Mobile will always work since they support both MediaTek and Qualcomm chips. You'll have to search the internet for MVNOs and which network they go on. The majority are compatible with T-Mobile and AT&T. Question I often get asked, will a de-Googled phone work with such and such a carrier? The answer should be known now from what I already said. The carrier support for the phone is tied to the cell baseband modem, not to the operating system. It could be running XOS, YOS, ABCOS, iOS, Android, Linux OS, Graphene, Calyx, and so on. And that has nothing to do with the cell baseband modem. Just find out the chip and you know the answer. MediaTek or Qualcomm? Are their phones not made in China? Now let's get into more detail about the internals of a phone. For the most part, most phones are assembled in China. There's no getting around this. You can blame big tech for this choice. But remember what I said about patents. The chips themselves are tied to patents, not just from the cell baseband modem, but also the CPU of the phone. Snapdragon CPUs common in Android phones are all made by Qualcomm. So that comes from the USA, or at least designed in the USA. A lot of the other CPUs are made by MediaTek as well. Apple makes its own CPU, and there are many custom CPUs. The interesting thing about how phone motherboards are constructed is that they use a technology called System on a Chip, or SoC. This is a level of miniaturization that's not immediately apparent. Although it's possible for China to add supply chain spyware at the hardware level, this is not necessarily the easiest way to do this. So that's kind of doubtful. Many parts are sourced from non-mainland Chinese sources, and miniaturized parts mean that they are manufactured and planned out typically by other entities with no way to insert additional circuitry. But I'll get back to this China question a little later when I talk about software. The cell baseband modem chip is actually a full computer with its own CPU, storage, and memory. The smartphone tech of a phone is a full computer as well. The GPS geolocation Wi-Fi module will also be an SoC. There are several significant points here about this design. One is that it is impossible to disengage a particular feature like turn off Wi-Fi or turn off the cell modem since it is built into the miniaturized motherboard. There are many security implications here as well. Basically, the cell baseband modem, the geolocation modules, are independent CPUs and may be doing things unknown to the operating system. None of these modules have open source code. Everything is closed and secret. The programming code that is proprietary is often called a blob by those in our field. It's just unknown binary code. It has already been proven that secret commands can be sent to the cell baseband modem, and that is the capability of the SIMjacker attack. Programming code can be sent with instructions on the SIM card, and various things can be done on the phone to intercept the traffic and texting. This happens at the device level, not at the carrier network. We do not know precisely what all the possible attacks are, but clearly this information is known only to state-level players, possibly only known to Western states or the Five Eyes when it comes to Qualcomm chips. And who knows who has access to the MediaTek chip? MediaTek, though, is a Taiwan company, so I can't imagine it being friendly to mainland China. But like any business, with the right amount of dollars and customization will be available, right? So it is clear that the cell baseband modem is not safe at all, at least not from governments. Is the phone safe from China? As I mentioned earlier, most phones are assembled in China, although many parts come from all over, and mostly using USA designs. But there's a lot of customization possible. Let me give you an example on Androids. An Android phone gets the operating system, which is Android, installed. This could be the Google version or the open source version. What I did not discuss is that there's an area in the phone where the manufacturer can add their custom code and apps. This is referred to as the OEM area. Typically, this is used to handle all the hardware drivers. This is only an issue on Androids, by the way. I'm sure Apple does not have OEM areas since they are fully in control of how the software is installed. The problem is that it is possible and easy for a manufacturer to put surveillance code in the OEM area. Now, they could get caught if they did this, since there are tools to watch for suspicious external traffic, like with software like Glasswire. However, I lay this out here as a risk. The OEM area contains proprietary code or blobs. Nothing is open source there, and each manufacturer could put anything in there. Since a company like Huawei, for example, has been accused of putting spyware on their phones, this would be a place where they could put it. Huawei phones have locked bootloaders, meaning we can't go examine what's in the OS itself through rooting. For this reason, we can only go with what others have discovered. This would be a reason to stay away from Huawei, even if it supposedly uses some version of AOSP. Even if Harmony OS, their fork of AOSP, is open source, the OEM area is not part of that. We can examine the content of the OEM area when we root the phone in the other brands with unlocked bootloaders like Motorola and so on, but we cannot do that with Huawei. Why they are not so forthcoming is anyone's guess. One of the threats on the cell baseband modem is Stingray. The government can listen in to calls and even capture traffic on LTE using a device for listening. This is often used by three-letter agencies to listen to targets. Back a couple of years ago, this listening device didn't even require a warrant, and this was so secretive. But you can actually see the warrants being used to surveil individuals today. Most of these baseband threats are not from casual hackers. This is from government threats, so don't expect someone to hack you via the cell baseband. By the way, I don't think Google and Apple are intercepting your phone calls through the cell baseband modem. They, however, use the fingerprint of the cell baseband modem for identification. The ID is the IMEI, or International Mobile Equipment Identity, and is tied to each unique cell chip. Where Google and Apple take over are on the operating system side of things. The cell baseband modem does have to reveal information about the caller, the carrier, the phone numbers, the IMSI, IMEI, to the OS, so the OS can see that. The OS, of course, communicates over the internet. However, that's provided on the phone. When someone like a non-state level hacker presumably hacks a phone, it is the OS that is hacked, not the cell baseband modem. The other side where big tech has their fingers all over the phone is when it comes to sensors and the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth radio. These particular features are the basis for location tracking, and I will tell you right now that you cannot turn off the location tracking being done by Apple and Google. They have access to information that no other app can get. I'll do a separate video on the location tracking, which is also tied to Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Probably too much to discuss in this video, which is more about introducing you to the tech. But just in general, the sensors in your phone, including the gyro, the GPS geolocation module, and some models have Face ID infrared sensors. Additionally, there is the Wi-Fi radio and the Bluetooth radio that can be used to transmit messages even secretly. These have all been used in some pretty nasty ways to spy on us, and done by Apple and Google. Now, aside from big tech surveillance, let me tell you something interesting. It's actually very hard to hack a phone, at least outside of Apple and Google. It's extremely difficult without knowing your password and having physical access to the phone. There is a known hack on iPhones called the Pegasus attack. This was a capability of an Israeli company called the NSO Group. This is a state-level capability, and these features have been sold to governments. The typical targets have been journalists and dissidents of the countries that are customers of NSO. Pegasus isn't heavily targeted towards US citizens as far as I'm aware. The reason probably is that certain governments have been involved. The US government does not need Pegasus. They can listen into conversations and get your texts through the use of the CALEA law, Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act. By law, each carrier grants the government access to direct interception of unencrypted communications over voice or text. This is done over the internet. They also have Stingray, which I already mentioned, that's done over the airwaves. The reason I'm explaining all this is that unless you're a government target, I don't think hacking is such a big threat. The security of a modern Android and iOS phone is actually pretty robust. The issue with phones is more about surveillance capitalism. This is where Google and even Apple collect our information. In general, the operating system has many secrets on the phone, from the ability to watch your photos or remote control your device to even listening on your microphone or watching you on a camera. All these are possible when the system has proprietary or hidden programming code. We do not have this risk when we use open source operating systems, and currently those are available only when using Android Open Source Project or AOSP, and I call this a de-Googled Android. And the other safe possibility with open source is a Linux phone. Unless you use open source software only, there will always be secrets on the phone. Let's say you use a de-Googled phone which runs Android AOSP or some fork of it. Yes, you can be certain there are no secretly operating programs on the operating system itself, but remember the cell baseband modem and the Wi-Fi are both SoCs. They have their own CPU. The cell baseband modem even communicates separately from the OS. Thus, it is clear that a phone can never be completely protected. There is no way to have a cell baseband modem that doesn't have a chip from MediaTek or Qualcomm. Again, it's a matter of patents. A couple of companies, Purism, who made the Librem 5 Linux phone, and Pine64, who made the PinePhone, came up with a partial solution. The solution was to put hardware switches to turn off the Wi-Fi and the cell baseband modem. While this in no way solves the problem completely, you can see now what the purpose of these moves are. By powering off these modules when not in use, then the user is able to guarantee that no external party is in control of the phone. Unfortunately, although this is wonderful in theory, we still have usability issues with Linux phones, so it's not suitable for the average user. I have both of these phones, and they're more for developers who are looking ahead. The typical user will still need something more practical like a de-Googled Android. Regarding the threats, I want to summarize this. With state-level threats, we have no defense. If you're an enemy of the state like Edward Snowden and the late John McAfee, then the only answer is to not use a phone. For those without concern for the state-level threat, the option to use a de-Googled phone eliminates the spy software that's embedded there by big tech. But there will always be the possibility of state-level interception. I hope that gives you a good big picture of how your phone works. I'm on the platform Odyssey.com. I'm now one of the top creators on there. Just for insurance in case I get the platform, please follow me there using the link in the description. Your engagement with this channel in the form of comments, likes, and especially subscriptions is very important to me. This channel grows because of you. So I hope you hit that subscribe button and that notification bell, and I truly appreciate it. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.